Hello, everybody. Good morning, and welcome back to the latest edition of the Morning Bulletin here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay. Joining me this morning is Dave Comerford, and we're going to start today by discussing the Saudi transfer window slamming shut in dramatic fashion yesterday, and Mohamed Salah is in fact still a Liverpool player. I mean, Dave, was there ever a doubt in your mind that he wouldn't still be a Red at the end of the window?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, the thing that was missing throughout is Salah kind of coming out and saying, or saying privately, more likely that he wanted to go. There was no indication whatsoever that happened from kind of certainly the British-based sources. And you think that if that had been the case, then usually it gets out, doesn't it? I think obviously there was no steps to kind of rule out the move either. So it was kind of left a bit up in the air. But until such a point where I kind of heard that Salah actively wanted to go, then I was never really going to be worried. And I mean, even if he had, I think it would have taken an absolutely astronomical offer in the final days of the window. Probably like quite a way above the Neymar world record, I'd say, for Liverpool to actually sell him. So I think just the timing of the interest, you never truly felt that something was going to happen, just because it was unconscionable for Liverpool at this particular point of the window. Obviously, it's not the end of the story. In January next summer, things will obviously maybe bubble up a bit earlier, and perhaps something actually comes of the transfer saga this time. But this year, in isolation, I don't think I was particularly concerned. I think the threat is going to grow in the future, but hopefully Liverpool can maximise the time they have left with Salah until then.
Yeah, no, I'm the same as you. I don't think there was really any point this summer where I was particularly worried that he was going to go, especially with how late that Saudi interest was. And obviously, the last thing that we'd heard publicly from Salah and his agent, obviously his agent came out a couple of months ago and said that he's very happy at Liverpool. He wouldn't have signed the big new bumper deal if he was having thoughts about leaving, and that he's fully committed to Liverpool. So that was sort of the end of it for me, really. But you mentioned it's not the end of this saga. Do you think it's just sort of kicked into the long grass? We just delayed it a little bit until January now, and we'll be back on here talking about it again then?
Yeah, I read an article this morning from The Athletic, and there was a line about how Saudi officials still feel that it's a matter of when rather than if with Salah. And to be honest, I think that's probably quite a broad feeling, that it's almost a case of how long Liverpool can and will delay it. But Salah, I think, is going to end up in the league eventually. And I think, by the time he does join, obviously the league will be stronger. I think he probably kind of feels the draw of playing there for reasons beyond money, kind of as a Middle Eastern athlete. And now they have obviously, this rising force in Middle Eastern football. So I think for a lot of players, have obviously just gone for kind of the amazing paychecks that they're going to get. I don't think it's like that for Salah. I think he is drawn to it for other reasons as well, and those are quite powerful reasons. So I think Salah goes there eventually. Obviously, the contract situation at Liverpool is going to play quite a big part in what happens. Are Liverpool going to try and negotiate another deal? If they don't, then they basically have to sell him next summer, because surely, even if they've let, Firmino, Wijnaldum, Emre Can, Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Milner, players like that, if they've let them go for free, that's one thing. But we're talking about a player here who could get, easily a 9-figure transfer fee. I don't see Liverpool forgoing that, certainly within the model that they have. So basically, if they don't try and negotiate a new contract, they have to sell him next summer. Because even if it gets to January the following year, then they can negotiate a free transfer under the FIFA rules. So, yeah, I think a lot of the question of when is going to come down to the contract, but I don't think it's necessarily a real question mark over whether Salah will go there. Like I say, it just depends on the timelines.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it seems pretty nailed on that he will end up there at some point. But I mean, we know the interest in him bringing him to the Saudi Pro League isn't going to have dwindled at all by January, by next summer. But do you expect the money that's there to have gone down a bit? Obviously, if it gets to summer, he will only have 1 year left on his contract. We never saw this sort of rumoured £200 million bid, it never actually came in before the deadline, did it? So do you expect that the amount of money being offered might be significantly less in the summer or January if we force them to wait that long? Or do you think that the interest will still be so high that the transfer fee still won't be something Liverpool can just say no to?
So I think that Salah, probably along with Ronaldo, Neymar, Mbappe, is one of the top kind of targets for the league in terms of not even just like having that good a footballer there, but just kind of the statement it would send, the symbolism, the commercial appeal, things like that. So I think the desire to sign him will not change at all. I think it's still going to be extremely strong. In terms of the transfer fee, so obviously Salah's going to be a year older. Come, roughly this time next year, he's going to have 1 year left on his contract, we think. So you'd suggest that the transfer fee would be lower. The one thing I'd say that makes me question that is it doesn't seem to have necessarily adhered to the normal rules of the transfer market this summer. I mean, the whole kind of business model this year has been targeting players often who are well into their 30s, paying far more than any team in Europe would, not only in terms of wages, but also transfer fee. And that's how you lure them in and build up your league. So whether they're going to kind of look at it from the strictly business standpoint and be like, hang on, no, he's not necessarily worth as much anymore just because of his age, his contract situation, I'm not sure. I think the burning desire to sign him is that strong that there's a decent chance that we're seeing similar kind of money talked about to this year. And obviously, Salah's not showing any signs at all of declining. I mean, the other day he was nominated for the Ballon d'Or. I think he's one of 4 players in the whole of world football who's been nominated for the last five Ballon d'Or awards. I mean, he is just a beacon of consistency. He's obviously started this season really well, goal involvement in 10 straight games now. If he keeps that up, then he's going to be kind of as valuable as an athlete. And then I think, like I say, because he is kind of the centerpiece of that Saudi vision, I think Liverpool can kind of milk that a little bit if they do decide to sell him, and they can get a huge transfer fee, more than they would have been able to get, say, if they'd let him go and they were going to sell him to, someone like PSG or Bayern Munich or Real Madrid or something like that, where they'd probably be inclined to pay about sort of maybe 70, 80 million. Whereas I think you should easily be able to get in excess of 100, pushing towards 150 for Salah next year.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just ask you to put your management/ownership hat on for Liverpool, let's assume that running down his contract and leaving on a free is off the table. Do you think they should be looking to cash in on him next summer, or do you think maybe a contract extension another couple of years? Can he still perform? Keep churning out the 20 goals and the 15 assists for another couple of years for Liverpool?
So if he carries on the way he's going at the moment and is still so consistent in his performances, in his output, which he continues to be, then it wouldn't sit right to sell him next summer. It kind of feels like 2025 would be more opportune, maybe, but you don't necessarily know how long Salah's going to be able to go on, because he is just athletically, he's just, phenomenal. Everyone sees the condition that he's in. So I don't think, I think he maybe goes the extra mile compared to some players, and that might stand him in good stead. We don't necessarily see many attackers in the Premier League, kind of, maybe more so in other leagues. You think of kind of Benzema, Lewandowski, players like that will continue to kind of put up huge numbers deep into their 30s. So Salah would be a bit of an exceptional case, but he probably kind of has been that for the past few years anyway. So if it was me, if I was in charge, I probably wouldn't look to sell next summer. I know there's a huge amount of money on offer, but I'd probably try and squeeze a bit more time out of the contract, maybe a 2-year extension or something like that. And I was thinking only recently, actually, that, Salah, that contract he signed last year, if that had the option for kind of an extra year, whether that was kind of activated by the club or the player at the end, then that could have been an ideal kind of arrangement. You see loads of other clubs do it. And that would give Liverpool the extra layer of comfort now So yeah, I think perhaps now looking back, the contract that was negotiated last year could have been done a little bit differently and put Liverpool in a slightly stronger position. But obviously, that's just the benefit of hindsight as well.
Yeah, I think I do come down on the keep hold of him for a few more years side of it. I just think he's such a hard player to replace. I mean, like I say, 20 goals, 15 assists, pretty much guaranteed a season. I do think he will stay at that level for another few years at least. But we'll move on now to discussing Michael Edwards' return to football. He's joined a consultancy group with his old Liverpool mate, Ian Graham. Obviously, both of them left Liverpool within the last couple of years. Ian Graham was one of the head analytics guys, and Michael Edwards obviously was the former sporting director. But they're now going to be offering clubs advice through sort of a consultancy agency. But I mean, I wanted to get your thoughts, Dave, on how much you think Edwards has been, if he has been missed in Liverpool's recruiting department. I think, the Caicedo, Lavia mess, a lot of people pointed to that and said this sort of thing wouldn't have happened under his tenure. But where do you come down on that one?
I think it's a very tricky question, to be honest. Obviously, you can look at it a few ways. I mean, one of the things that Edwards was best at, probably the thing he was best at, was identifying targets. And if we look at the players that Liverpool have signed since then, I mean, kind of Fabio Carvalho, obviously he's out on loan at Leipzig after one season. Calvin Ramsey, jury's still out on him. Obviously with the fact that he's been injured. Darwin Nunez, same applies, but that's because of inconsistent form. And then you look at kind of this year. To be fair, McAllister and Szoboszlai look like very strong deals. We'll see what happens with Gravenberch, Endo. A few more question marks over that. But, let's not forget that when Edwards was in charge, Liverpool signed Ragnar Klavan, which is a pretty comparable deal to that. So I think in terms of the players that are being brought in, obviously Gakpo as well, I forgot to mention there. Looks very good. In terms of players being brought in, I still think Liverpool are very strong. I think it's maybe more kind of the, you mentioned there the negotiations with Caicedo and Lavia, just the management side of things behind the scenes. Like everything feels a little bit more chaotic now. I think Edwards, brought a sense of order across the board. And that's probably what Liverpool have missed the most up to this point. But I do think that the longer it goes on, you kind of feel like he left, Julian Ward left, because they felt as if they were being sidelined a little bit by most of all the power of kind of Jurgen Klopp and his coaching staff. And I personally don't necessarily think that a club in kind of the modern era that wants to kind of enjoy sustained success should be kind of putting all its eggs in kind of that basket and just making the manager kind of that number one figure who's almost, unopposed. I think you need that balance. You need that kind of consensus across the board. So don't fully like the direction the club's going in that regard. But I do think that, generally speaking, in terms of the incoming transfers, at least there hasn't been too much of a hit that the club have taken.
Yeah, as you say, I think obviously the McAllister deal, getting that one done so quickly, so early on in the transfer window, obviously got that one over the line before most clubs had even started looking at other players. And for the price we got him for, I mean, just an absolute steal. So yeah, Liverpool's still very much capable of doing those wonder deals without Edwards, but we'll see what he does in the footballing world with this new consultancy group. But Liverpool, they do have the sort of issue they've kicked into the long grass with getting Jörg Schmadtke in for a season. Obviously, once he goes, if he does leave after a season, maybe he stays on. Liverpool, they are then going to have another issue of they need to get another sporting director in, aren't they, Dave? And do you see that being a big problem for the club, or do you think they'll just get somebody in for the short term if they have to, like Jörg Schmadtke?
Kind of feels like a repeat of the defensive midfield situation, except with sporting directors, because they went for kind of the stopgap sort of solution with it. They obviously didn't necessarily like the markets of names that were available. It's hard to read what's going to happen with that, to be honest, because I think, again, if Klopp's very powerful, I think Schmadtke was kind of his man coming into the club. I think from the outside, the way the transfer window went will mean that it's quite polarized within Liverpool in terms of should this guy stay put, or does there need to be a change? Because obviously the players that came in, I think everyone's broadly happy with those 4 players, but it's the fact that they had the embarrassment with Caicedo and Lavia. They had obviously some delays there as well. I think there was a period between Szoboszlai signing early July, I want to say, and I think the deal for Endo was just before the game against Bournemouth, so mid-August. So there was quite a big chunk there where nothing really happened. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one to read. Like I say, it's going to depend on sort of how much Schmachko was kind of hamstrung by the money he had available to him and things like that. We don't fully know that from the outside, but if I had to kind of lean one way or the other, I think there probably will be a more long-term appointment, because ultimately, when you look at Schmachke's CV, I don't necessarily know if it's the CV you want for a long-term Liverpool sporting director, and certainly coming after, Michael Edwards and Julian Ward, and especially in the case of Edwards, one of the best, if not the best, that we've seen kind of in the modern era of the Premier League at that role.
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen what Liverpool do with that sporting director position at the end of the season, whether Jörg Schmadtke decides to stay on or whether they get a more long-term appointment in, as Dave says. But we will, of course, bring you any news on that as and when we have it, just like any other breaking news. During this international break, obviously, one more week until Liverpool are back in action. I think it's the 16th of September against Wolves away. But for now, that is all we've got time for here on the Morning Bulletin. So, Dave, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.